Welcome to the Dark Shadows Podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Tom Diamond, and Keith Chowgle, bringing you all the odd goings-on from Collinsport, Maine.
Hi, so this is Tom Diamond, the Dark Shadows co-host of Literary License with Vicky Ray. And Vicky, say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, and we are very pleased today to have Sharon Smyth. Sharon Smyth, as all our Dark Shadows fans will know, was Sarah Collins, little Sarah, Barnabas' sister, when Dark Shadows was on the air back in 1967. Sharon, how are you today?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Actually, it's afternoon by now, but we're doing.
You're right.
We're doing. That's all right.
I haven't had enough coffee.
I think I've had too much coffee by now, but anyway, we want to thank you. Keith is unavailable for this podcast, but we, of course, want to thank you for your participation in this endeavor.
My pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to, why don't we just start by, I've been looking at a couple of salient facts in your background. You were, I think, born in 1957, I believe.
That's correct.
Yeah, was it November 29th? Is that
Very
it?
good. You've done your homework.
Oh, so far so good. Well, you'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, it's really an honor to meet you. When I was a young girl, we used to run home so we could watch, because my mother did not want me watching it because I was like 5 or 6, and it used to
oh my God,
give us nightmares. But we watched it when she wasn't around.
Of course.
My brothers,
I hear that funny.
My brothers they're hardcore fans too, and it's just so great to meet you.
And I watched.
It's nice to meet you too.
And I watched you when I was a kid, around 12 or 13 years old, back in Brooklyn, and of course we're going to talk about that later. But I just switched. My favorite scene of you on Dark Shadows was the last scene that you had played in the 1795 segment when you died, and you told Jonathan as Barnabas, "I love you, Barnabas." I mean, I was like, I was misty.
Very moving.
Yeah.
You turned into a ghost. Didn't you turn into a ghost?
She was a ghost.
Well, not at that very moment, but yes.
She was a ghost before that. But anyway, getting back to your real life. So you got into the business at 5 years old. Wow,
yeah.
Underage. What made you decide to do that?
To be honest with you, it was all completely accidental. So I just have to say, I guess it was meant to be. I was living in Philadelphia with my mother and father. I did have an older sister. She's 10 years older than me. Her name's Nadine. And we were at the local laundromat, believe it or not. It was a big deal then. We're going way back now to have this big, fancy local laundromat that had a television set in it that people could watch while they were waiting for their laundry. My mother met a woman named Florence Creasy there, and didn't know it, but that woman was a personal manager for children. And she asked my mother, would you be interested in getting your daughter involved in maybe modeling commercials? And I don't know what my mom was thinking at the time, but she said yes. We had no connections whatsoever at that time with anything like that. Just blue collar family living in a row home in Philadelphia. So this was really out of the norm for us. but they exchanged phone numbers. This is way before cell phones. It was wasn't that easy. They exchanged phone numbers. And to be honest with you, I don't think my mother really ever expected to hear from this woman, but she was wrong. And within a very, very short period of time, Florence called my mother and said, would you be willing to take your daughter up to New York City for an audition? And my mom said yes. And the first couple of jobs that I went to for these auditions, I worked with Sears and Roebuck's catalog, modeling, some other print ads, and I started to do commercials. My first commercial was for Post Sugar Crisp. With the sugar. Yep. In fact, several fans actually have found the footage and sent it to me of that first commercial. And when I first saw it, I hadn't seen that in 50 years. I never saw it, to be honest with you. I made it, and I had vivid memories of making it. But to see the whole commercial, it's so dated. And there are so many things in that commercial that would never fly today. The sugar, for starters, they since changed the name of Post Sugar Crisps to Honey Crisps, I believe.
Yeah.
But back in the day, that was an attraction. It had sugar in it. That's great. Kids are going to love it. And there's a lot of violence in the commercial.
Really?
It's a bank robbery. People are getting punched out and,
honestly,
tied up. And it's great. I mean, it's
Now I'm going to have to go look for it because I want to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I should send it to you, or I'll post it up on my Facebook page or something like that. I do that periodically just because people get a big kick out of it. But yeah, it would never fly today. But I had a run there for a while from the ages of 5 to 8, where I was doing a lot of commercials. I don't know how deeply you've dug, Tom, with regard to my bio and what commercials I've participated in, but a lot of the products don't even exist anymore, which I think is really funny.
Right.
But I had a string of commercials that I did for a while in modeling. I had the look for the time. I had the braids, the dark hair, the freckles. I was small for my age. I was, not afraid of strangers. So it was a plus for me at the time.
It was another good time in a different world, for sure.
Absolutely.
You actually did Lux Liquid.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That must have been funny. Were you holding the Lux or something like that?
I don't remember that commercial, but I do have it on my bio, and I have copies of my resume that my mother used to keep. It's on there. I don't remember that commercial specifically, but I worked for Kodak and Campbell's Soup and some cereals, and you kind of lose track, to be honest with you.
How were you able to how did they manage the juxtaposing your commercial time with your going to school at this point? You're in first grade, second grade.
That's actually an interesting story, because when I started, I wasn't in school, and there were gaps in between. This wasn't like I was going up to New York every week, not at this time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I started first grade normally like everybody else. By the time I was in third grade, I was missing so much school that the truant officer came to the house and confronted my parents. And my parents took me out of school, and they put me in a school in New York City for everyone wasn't in the profession, but everybody had a reason why they couldn't do school on a regular basis. So I went to that school. They called it a school for professionals. That's not necessarily a true definition, but it was called MACE School, M-A-C-E. Mm-hmm. And I loved it there, and I thrived there. I was there for third and fourth grade. So they were really understanding when I had to lose gaps of time. But I always did my schoolwork. I was pretty bright back then. I kept my grades up. That was never an issue. It wasn't until I started to get a bad attitude as a preteen where the grades started to go down, not because of lack of brain cells, but more lack of attitude, or I should say a lot of attitude. Yeah. it was more important to me at that time to be a social butterfly than to do my lessons. Really, the working in the business, the television shows, the commercial, really never had a huge impact on my education.
Mm-hmm.
My parents made sure that I, accomplished what I needed to accomplish for my education. We worked around it. It was fine.
Well, your mom did not sound like the usual show business mother that we usually, that where the mother drags the kid to everything, and make her, it sounds like she had more of an equanimity about that, in terms of balancing your life.
Absolutely, both my parents. We all enjoyed the opportunity of going up to New York, meeting these people, getting to be on sets and that kind of thing, the travel part. We all enjoyed that as a family.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. They made sure that I joined Girl Scouts. I participated in school activities. I had normal friends. I never felt that I got a big head about it. At the time, it was really, starting so young, it was really all I knew, that balance between, I do that, but I also am just me at home and go to school with my friends. And, I was pretty balanced that way. And you're right about my mom. My mom was never a pushy stage mom. She took it all in stride. As I said before, it really wasn't her lane. She didn't know a lot about that. It was always a learning process, getting working papers, dealing with agents and that kind of thing. But, she was adorable. She was very gregarious, and she loved people, and she loved the adventure of it. And, she didn't push me so much as supported me. This was a great opportunity. So we went with it, and it didn't have any negative impact on
Did they
my
seek
family.
you out?
Excuse me?
Did Dark Shadows seek you out, or did you decide to go audition? Or
Dark Shadows audition was just another audition for me. I had done Search for Tomorrow. You're going on auditions, and sometimes you get very little information as to what even the audition is for. Sometimes I'd go in, I wasn't sure if it was for print ad or for commercial or for a voiceover. But I just went on this audition, and I found out that it was for a soap opera that I knew nothing about. My mother knew nothing about it. I remember them dressing me up. I had a fitting for an old-fashioned costume, and I remember that being exciting. I also was doing an egg custard commercial right about the same time, where I also wore an older costume, and I remember that. I remember being excited about that. But as far as Dark Shadows, it was just another audition that my agent sent me on. And the funny thing was, the first audition that I went for Dark Shadows, there was a lot of little girls there, an overwhelming amount of little girls of various looks. And my girlfriend, Eileen Burrell, was there, and she was a waif-like looking blonde, and I was dark and a little bit chunky in the cheeks, and I just thought it was interesting that when they honed it down for the next audition, it came down to the two of us. And I assumed she would get it because she actually had already portrayed a ghost on, I believe, like Wagon Train or one of those shows of that era that was like that. And I just kind of assumed it, and that was no big deal. It's just another audition, there'll be other ones. But they brought me back for a third audition, and I got the part. And in retrospect, and I've said this before, and it's not based in fact, it's only based in my feeling. I feel like Sharon Smyth, little Sarah Collins, I looked more like Barnabas's sister, more that family, dark hair, fair skin, dark hair. That's an assumption on my part, but I sometimes think that's the reason why I got it, because I fit better, the look.
Sharon, who auditioned you for the part?
The first time I went in, it was a long conference table full of a lot of people, and I couldn't tell you who any of them were. You have to remember, I was 9 years old, and I was doing this all the time, and I didn't. certainly had no idea the significance of Dark Shadows. So, you know, you just go in and you meet all these people and you're a little nervous and you do your thing and you leave. The second time, it was Dan Curtis, who I did not know was Dan Curtis at the time, with just a couple other people. So I didn't know who they were, but I knew afterwards that it was Dan Curtis that was in that room with me. And the reason that I know that is because I remember what he looked like and what he sounded like, because Dan Curtis was a big person physically and in his personality, in his demeanor. He was just, you know, a power to be reckoned with. He was overwhelming, and I'm this little girl, and I remember him, not that he was gruff with me or anything, he just was kind of booming.
And so what was it like to work with, I'll just go over some of the stars and stuff like that. You talked before about how it was to work with Jonathan as Barnabas. What do you remember about him?
Jonathan Frid?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jonathan also was a big man. He had really big hands. And he was funny. He was serious. He was empathetic towards me. We had a number of scenes where we were up close and personal, face to face, and he could be intimidating. And he would always get down to my level and talk to me. And there were a couple times I expressed, you know, like, oh, I don't think I'm going to remember my line, or I'm afraid of this or whatever. And he would say to me, relax, like in his own way. He would say to me, relax, it's okay. We all make mistakes. It's not the end of the world. You'll be fine. Do what you do, you know. And I felt that he was empathetic to me in that way.
That's great.
That he kind of confirmed to me that, like, you don't have to be perfect. It's okay. It's just a TV show.
Yeah,
but he was.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say
very,
it's kind of entertaining to see some of the bloopers because it was live when you guys did it. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Like Mrs. Stoddard couldn't get the door open or something like that.
Absolutely.
That would have been intimidating for a young girl.
It was very funny. Actually, there's a story that is told oft times of little Sarah walking through the cemetery outside of the mausoleum, and her flowing little gown that gets caught on a branch of a bush. Well, that was phony, and it knocked the astroturf, which was, you know, phony, into the gravestone, which was phony, and everything was moving as she was walking, you know. But you have to go back to that time. You have to, not 1795, go back to the time that the show was being made. It was live to tape. No one ever thought that it was going to be seen for years and years and years later. It was a daily show that, you know, you kind of had to let it go. You do this show, you're already practicing for the next show, for the next day, 5 days a week. So things like that make it endearing to me now when I look at it. But at the time, those bloopers were just, you know, you just keep moving. It's like when you're in community theater, things happen. Things get knocked over, phones get glued down. I mean, you know, there's ringing going on and nobody's answering. Things like that happen when you're doing something live. And the Dark Shadows was treated very much as if it was a live show or a play. Mistakes were made and you kept moving. I love to watch, you talk about the bloopers. I love when the microphone comes down on somebody, you know?
Yep.
No, maybe if you don't know what that is, you don't notice.
Right.
But certainly if you're involved and you know what it is, it's comical. I like it.
They like that so much. I don't know if you remember the name of the guy that handled the boom. The guy's name was Max Juggerhands. And later on in the show, they were so, I think the crew was so fond of the way he let the boom get into the scene that in the 1897 segment, they named it was like a kind of a mannequin involved with the David and Amy plot, and they called it Mr. Juggins. But that was actually,
Really?
yeah, and that was actually named for Max Juggerhands, who handled the boom mic.
Oh, wow. That's funny. I
Yeah.
didn't even know that.
Yeah, that's what happens when you get into all these trivial things that all the fans today want to know about, because the ones who were actually in the street greeting the stars, I mean, I still envy them, but I mean, but people and that was great for them. But everybody else, of course, wants to know every little trivial detail about the show that they can latch on to. But certainly, your input was certainly a part of that, and you're providing insight that only you could provide into. I'm kind of curious about what are your memories of Grayson Hall, because you did deal with her as Natalie Dupre. Did you deal with her on the show at all?
Yes. Most of the time that I had interaction with the other actors, including Grayson, were in the rehearsal room and on the set.
Mm-hmm.
My mother guarded me most of the other time. I wasn't allowed to run around or interfere with anything. This was work. But in the rehearsal rooms in the mornings, when everybody was half awake and out of makeup and, still smoking their cigarettes and drinking their coffee to do the run through, I remember Grayson coming in, her hair slicked back wet, no makeup, maybe a scarf around her head, smoking a cigarette and drinking her coffee and just having big laughs with the other adults. I didn't interact with her personally too much, except when we were rehearsing. But I remember her laugh, definitely. She was a bigger than life person too. I think I see a theme here, for me personally, as being a little girl, that these people were so open and having a good time. That was all good for me. That was good for me to see these adults working with each other and having a good time. It was definitely a good atmosphere to be in.
What about David Hennessy? And of course, he's the one that was your age practically. And
yeah, I think David was a year older than me, and he was well established in Dark Shadows by the time that I got there. He'd already been on the show for probably a year. And he knew all the ins and outs, and he knew who, you should talk to and who you shouldn't talk to, and everybody's little idiosyncrasies. It was fun to have someone my own age there, but it also was intimidating sometimes because he could be quite the character. And I was always the good girl. I followed the rules. I didn't want to get in trouble. And he was a little bit more, what's the word?
Was he a practical joker of some sort?
He was a practical joker, and he definitely was the kind of kid that wanted to push the envelope just to see what he could get away with. Which when you're 10 years old, like, I get it, that's cool, But
do you recall anything of note in terms of something that he got you to help him out with in terms of a practical joke thing?
Oh, well, everybody's always heard that we were playing one time on the set, and he told me to get into the coffin behind the secret door in the mausoleum, and I was like, oh no, we can't do that. And he was like, no, it's okay, really, get in there. And I did, and he sat on top of it and wouldn't let me out. And I think that's probably why I have a little bit of claustrophobia to this day.
That would put me in therapy if somebody did that to me. It wasn't spooky, horrible. It didn't have that effect on me. But I got upset because I knew I was going to be on set soon. I couldn't miss my cue. And here he was, trapping me. So yeah, that's the kind of silly stuff that he would do. Let's do this. And I'm like, no, we can't do that. We're going to get in trouble. No, come on, let's do it anyway. Nothing harmful, just kid stuff.
Sounds like the character he played. David Collins was also into that kind. Although David Collins had a malevolent bent when he wanted to play those, like cutting like early on in the show, cutting the father's brakes, taking the valve out. Poor Roger. Catherine Leigh Scott. What are your memories about her?
I remember that she was very beautiful. That was intimidating enough for me at that age. And she was a grown up, and she was very beautiful. And she got to wear the coolest hair pieces and makeup and gowns during the 1795 portion of the show. I was always envious. I would go into the makeup room and hairstylists and watch them fix the women up. You know, I was a little jealous. I was like, how come I don't get that? You know? But I didn't get to wear makeup, and nobody did my hair. Mom brushed my hair out, and that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she was very, very pretty.
There's a lot of beautiful women on Dark Shadows.
Oh, sure.
Oh, heavens, yes. Laura Parker.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. She's stunning.
Yeah.
How is Laura Parker?
Alexandra. Excuse me?
Oh, I'm sorry. How is Laura Parker to get along with Lara Parker?
Also about the same. She was very beautiful. I didn't have a lot of interaction with her, except in the rehearsal room and on set. Wasn't as if I hung out with these people. The grown-ups all kind of hung out and went to dinner and drinks, but I didn't have that opportunity. I don't feel like I actually met and got to know these people until I was older, until I went back to the convention, and that's when I got to know them.
You also, though, had some interaction with Joan Bennett, who played your mom in the 1795 segment. And
yes.
Of course, you were dealing with a kind of like a living legend there.
Absolutely.
Was she kind and gracious? I get that vibe that she probably was kind and gracious towards you.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, being 10 years old, I had no idea who she was, but my mother certainly did. And my mother influenced me in that she would tell me, you know, she is a real movie star. And she was never the kind of person, Joan Bennett was never the kind of person that abused that title. I don't know if that's the right way to put it or not, but you know, when she came into a room, you knew she came into the room, but not because she was obnoxious, because she just had this presence, almost like royalty to me. She was small in stature, but she held herself so poised that just demanded respect and attention. And yes, she was very nice to me. Very, I don't want to say motherly. I don't know if that's even the right word, and not condescending at all. But, you know, she would do things like pat my hand, and, you know, smile at me and say nice things to me.
She seemed like a force.
What's that?
She seemed like a force. She's got, what I've noticed, especially in the beginnings of Dark Shadows, she has a really commanding performance. You know, she's just got it so together, you know.
Yeah. A true professional. That's, you know, the best thing I could probably say about her. She was just a true professional. And to go from, she had some unbelievable experiences in her life, the people that she interacted with, and both on screen and in her life. And to be doing a soap opera in New York City with this troupe of characters in this bizarre soap opera, she could have really been snub about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? But she wasn't. She took it. It was a job. It was serious. She gave it every bit of herself that she gave any other part. I have a lot of respect for that.
Well, my understanding also that she was pretty smart about how she entered into the Dark Shadows role. She had done movies. She, you know, television. She, to a certain extent, she knew that she was no longer going to get the ingenue, the young leads. And she also, I think, was very smart enough to see the future of television. And and I think she gave it the respect that it was due.
Absolutely.
So you agree with that? You agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just as a side note, it's a very depressing side note. I am older now than Joan Bennett was when she did the show. One day I to somebody on Facebook about Dark Shadows and age and, whatever. And I made a joke about I said, I'm old enough to be little Sarah's great grandmom. Now they were referring to me as if I was still that little girl. And I was like, oh, please. And then it dawned on me. I said, oh my gosh, I really am old. I'm older than Joan Bennett was.
Well, considering that I'm two or 3 years older than you, so I practically feel like an old man now.
There you go.
Thanks a lot.
It's a privilege not given to everybody, so it's all good.
No, but it's the experience you had with the ad, and of course I could go down a list, but I don't want to concentrate that. But and Vicky, please feel free to. Vicky, are there any actors you would like to know about? Whether
I was interested in Kate Jackson, and because I didn't know. It took me a while to figure out. I go, oh wow, she was on Charlie's Angels too back in the '70s, so she really springboarded into, her profession. And I was wondering, like, what was she like?
That was later in the show, though.
Yeah.
I actually never met Kate Jackson.
No.
I did not have that pleasure, no. But you're right. I mean, sometimes I'm asked about certain
and you just
characters that show that I didn't know. But if you go online and you look at the list of actors that have been on Dark Shadows, it's amazing. Even if they only were.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Sure. Exactly. And it wasn't until I was adult and went and looked that I realized, wow, you talk about springboard, and a lot of people did an episode of Dark Shadows and then went on to way bigger and better things.
Absolutely. Gail Strickland, Marsha Mason.
Yeah.
They were all unknown at that point. They were just starting. Susan Sullivan, who was a personal friend of Catherine Leigh Scott, and she got her a job as a ghost stand-in. Way back in the early, but but it's just a small number. You're really amazed at people who have been on that you just never thought that you would have seen these people on them. Do you remember anything about Thayer David? Because yes, please share.
Thayer David actually was one of my favorite people on Dark Shadows. Again, because he never treated me like I was less than. He never treated me like, a child. He talked to me like a fellow actor. Not that I was any great actor. I don't mean that, but he knew we were both there for the same thing. We were both serious about what we were doing, and he treated me with respect. And that always made a huge impression on me. And there's a scene that I always, always remember. We were in a cemetery, and the script called for him to pick me up. And I knew from having listened to conversations in rehearsal that he had a bad back. And now I'm 10 years old. I weighed, 75 pounds? I don't even think I weighed that much. I was a little girl, and he had to pick me up. And I felt really bad. And I remember saying to him, you can half pick me up. You don't have to pick me up all the way. And he was like, honey, it's fine. He said, you barely weigh what a bag of groceries weighs. I'll be fine. But I remember that because it was like this personal, I know it sounds silly, but it was this little personal interaction between me and this grown man who I didn't know at the time, and only later learned that he was a true actor. I mean, a professional actor with a lot of history behind him. And, at that moment, though, he was just a fellow actor, and I know he was really funny. He was really smart. And everybody, I have these visions of everybody sitting around the rehearsal table, and there's always cigarettes involved, which really makes me laugh now because that's so passé. That's not something that you see very often, a room full of adults.
No. What about the location shots? I mean, we're going through the book here, and you went to some really, was that a real house, that big house? They belong to
Well,
somebody.
first, let me say that before Dark Shadows was made, they did go out on locations and pick places that they wanted to utilize, to copy from and to use shots from. One of them was Seaview Terrace, which is in Rhode Island. And I've actually been there multiple times, but only as an adult. I never got to go on location when I was on this show.
Oh, rats.
I know, right? But I've been there since. Collingswood, and I'm trying to think, not the old house, but the new house, was based off of Seaview Terrace.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I went to Seaview Terrace and I walked into the library and I was like, wow, this looks familiar. It was the same woodwork, the same, everything. And I felt like going home to me.
It had to be a little nostalgic, kind of bittersweet.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the outside, I think probably the Crashing Waves and Widow's Point probably was taken from there as well. And then there was Lyndhurst Mansion in Tarrytown, New York. I believe they used shots from there. But unfortunately, I think that was for the movie.
That was for the movie, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I was on the show, unfortunately, I didn't get to go on location. I filmed only in New York.
Well, rats.
I know, right?
I don't know if you're asked this too often, but what are your memories about the crew that you worked with?
I love the crew.
Tell us about that.
I love the crew because they were fun. They were very professional in what they did, but they were a relaxed bunch. And there were, if I remember correctly, there were 3 cameramen. And, unlike today, these cameras were behemoths.
Yes.
They were huge pieces of equipment with these round bars, balancing bars at the bottom. And they just screamed to be climbed on. And, those are the kind of things I wanted to do. I wanted to climb on the camera. I wanted to look in it. They had these big monster cords coming out of it, wrapped around. They were all over the place. You had to be careful where you walked on set. And the cameramen were great. Nobody ever slapped my hand. Nobody ever yelled at me. They'd encourage me, get up, look, this is what you do for this. And as a 10-year-old, that's so cool. And I remember multiple boom guys, so I'm not going to say one way or the other about that. You mentioned the one. But they also were the same way. And the special effects guys, I love those guys. They would come in the morning with these guns that looked like leaf blowers, and they would blow cobwebs all over the place. And it was like liquid rubber. What?
I didn't know that's how they did that.
Oh, yeah. And it was like liquid latex or something like that. And then they would spray them, all over the place. And I always picked at it. And I would make like super balls out of it, I never got yelled at. I did get yelled at for picking the wax off the candles, though. All those beautiful blue candles that were all over the place. Obviously, for photographic reasons, you want to see the drip down the side. But as a 10-year-old, I certainly wasn't thinking of that. And I would pick it off. Just one of those things, it was there to be picked. I did get admonished for that a couple of times. I stopped doing it.
Sounds like something I would have done when I was 10.
Exactly. And I remember the Blue Whale, the bar in the show.
Yeah.
If you ever notice on the big 4-panel, I think it's 4 panels window, you would come in the door and the window would be on the left-hand side. You would see the water, reflection on the window because it's supposed to be down by the cannery, the harbor, whatever. On the other side of that window, behind the set, on the floor, was a guy with like an oil pan or a little bigger than an oil pan with water in it going like this. Well, I just thought that was the greatest thing. So they would let me play, and the guy that made the noise for the creaking doors and all the stuff that today is all digital, electronic, whatever.
Right.
It was hands-on back then. It was, much more rudimentary back then. But it was fun for a 10-year-old.
Were
We
there
were
any?
talking about the blue whale the other day ago, me and Keith were, and I was just getting a kick out of the people dancing in there to that one, that same tune. They were just like getting it.
Yep. Some wild dancing going on.
Well, it was the 60s.
There were 3 basic songs that they did. 2 or 3 basic songs, and one was da 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 da. That's it. And then there was the rock. Then there was the rock song. Dum
Yeah.
dum 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 dum. That's the thing. You see Carol and Nancy Barrett in the church.
Yes.
And the Frug and the monkey, and I'm like, oh my God, just looking at that stuff, and it was so popular back then. I mean, they were like brand new dances. How was Nancy Barrett to work with? Did you have a lot of interaction? She was Millicent, really, back then. Did you have interaction with her?
Again, probably only in rehearsal and on set, not so much besides that. But
yeah,
you have to remember these girls were 10 or more years older than me.
Sure.
They were all young women in their 20s, 20-somethings.
So some related to you more than others, obviously, depending upon your scene.
Yeah.
With them. Of the crew, getting back to that, was there any one in particular? I'm curious about Leela Swift, who did a lot of the directing back then. Did she direct you a lot, or what do you remember about that? Did Dan do any directing at that point?
I don't remember ever being directed by Dan. He obviously sat in on some of the rehearsals, and he certainly was in the sound room during taping. Leela Swift also, I had interaction with her in the rehearsal rooms, and I knew that she was up in the sound room. I don't remember her directing me specifically. I had a lot of free reign with regard to that. I had not a lot of dialogue, and once they give you your spot and block out the scene and you know where you're going to go, there really, for me personally, there wasn't a whole lot of direction. Now, I do remember getting direction for that dying scene, though. But I don't think it was Leela.
You were cute as a button, though.
I know, right?
You're so like a little cherub.
I look at pictures of little Sarah, and I'm like, oh.
Did this scare you at all? The old shot?
No, it was so cool.
Out of me. That's why my mother turned off.
You have to remember, I was on the other side of the screen for this, so I got to see Jonathan being made up in the makeup room. Right. I actually I picked them up off the floor. Some of the prosthesis prosthetic that they used for Jonathan's forehead, for his nose, for his chin. They would practice with different shapes and whatnot. And the ones that got thrown on the floor, I would pick them up. So I got to see the transformation. So, it's like Halloween. You can't be scared of it when you're on that side of it.
Does anybody know what happened to the portrait?
I don't. I'm not to say that
somebody's got it.
Yeah.
Sure.
There are a few things that I see the fans online question where they are. Even down to the drawing that Sam Evans did of Sarah Collins.
Right.
What happened to that? Did it get trashed? Did somebody save it? I don't really know. I know I certainly didn't take anything away from that show physically.
I remember there was one thing though where, and I think it's a story that's been told more than once. Dan was in the control room and he got annoyed at you for something that you said or you did wrong or something like that, and you just heard the voice. What was that?
Yes.
What was that?
David and I were actually on set being taped. I mean, it was the real deal. and we were astride a fallen tree, and we were having dialogue. And one of us missed a cue. Something wasn't said properly, and the other person didn't pick up on it properly. And there was a moment which seemed like forever, where we didn't know where to go with the conversation. And our eyes were screaming at each other, like without words, like, who's supposed to say the next thing? Where are we going with this? And David, being the professional that he was, made some random remarks and got us back on track again, and it was okay. Now, when you watch that scene, I know I have heart failure every time I watch it because I know what's going on. But I don't think it's that bad for the general viewer to watch. It wasn't like a big gaping hole or anything like that. But after that scene ended and they went to commercial, I heard up in the sound room, they were not happy, But yes, and it was Dan's voice that I heard. But no one ever yelled at me directly.
That's good.
For that. It was just one of those things.
That's good. Hey, how were did you get a lot of fan mail as Sarah?
I did get a lot of fan mail, and there's tape of an interview somewhere out there where I apologize to some of those fans for not responding to that fan mail. At that time, I did not really understand the significance of that. And my mother, having no experience with it, didn't really put a lot of thought into it either. So a lot of the fan mail that we got was not responded to, unfortunately. But I still have a whole big stack of them. And I sometimes think about trying to contact those people and say, sorry.
Wow. Were they waiting for you out in the street when you came out?
No. No, that didn't happen for me either. And I don't know exactly why, but either that wasn't happening during my time on the show. Maybe it didn't happen till later because I know Quentin was involved in that, or David Selby was involved in that. Either that or my mother chose to keep me from experiencing that.
I see. I see.
I'm not sure, but that was not my experience. I've seen lots of pictures and heard lots of stories, but that was never my experience. But I did get
sure there was a couple stalkers and some, like especially Jonathan Fred.
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. And I have stalkers now, believe it or not.
Still? To this day?
It's horrible.
Oh my God.
I have a couple because of Facebook. I'm I love Facebook. Everybody knows I love Facebook. But there have been over the years a couple of people that chose to utilize it in a negative way. And one still does. It's been years, and this person still contacts me with great regularity, so much so that I contacted the state police.
That's absurd.
No,
that's absurd.
Yeah, it's a little crazy, and it really speaks to me of people that are in a whole nother pay grade than I am, that are currently working, that experience this. It can be really horrible. Mine is manageable at this point for me, but when you're in the public at any level, and somebody chooses to abuse that contact,
sure,
and be nasty and vicious and ugly, it's scary. It feels like you have no control of that. And no matter how many times I utilize the tools that are in place to stop it, with blocking and contacting Facebook and that kind of thing, this person continues to find ways to get to me. And
is your Facebook public or is it private, or?
It's mostly public.
Actually,
I did at one point have two Facebook accounts, my personal one and then a professional one. And I actually, after 3 years, I think it was, I had to shut down my public one because I couldn't fight her anymore. I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I chose to shut that.
You're a lovely, engaging human being. I can't imagine why somebody would want to be mean to you.
In fact, from my standpoint, and I mean, I got to know Sharon via Facebook, and I think that Sharon is probably one of the most outgoing, one of the most amenable, and caring towards the Dark Shadows fans from the standpoint. Well, it's true. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't. And we're always, I'm always touched by the uplifting messages that Sharon gives on her Facebook website, which are just general, keep your chin up, life, positive messages about life and about how you have to counteract the negative. So, and that I think is a type of humanity which I think is unique, maybe because, she was a child actress, and then, of course, she went on into the regular world as an adult. But but it's also, I think, Sharon, probably a part of your personality and how you were brought up, and your ability to want to give towards this segment of the Dark Shadows population that admired your performance. But it's something extra, and I think that's kind of unique. So.
I think that's one of the reasons why I love Facebook so much. People tease me about it, but I think that if used correctly, it's a wonderful vehicle for touching people. There are so many people out there in and outside of the Dark Shadows community, because obviously I'm much more than just Dark Shadows connected. There's a big world around me of all kinds of people, and I have a lot of life experience, not all good. Has nothing to do with Dark Shadows, just my life. And there's a lot of hurt people in the world, and we all know this. Everybody has a story, and everybody is fighting battles, whether they're personal internal battles or outward things that we don't have control over. And I found my niche in Facebook to share, to give back, to use my little bit of notoriety to help others, to encourage others, because there's a large portion of Facebook that is very ugly. And I'm going to use the kind of an analogy of vampirism, and I've said this before, that vampirism is alive and well and living on Facebook, because I believe that one of the truest definitions of vampirism is sucking the life force from other people.
Yes, you nailed that one. Yes.
And Facebook can do this, unfortunately. There are people who use Facebook to do that. And I just read this morning on my morning check on Facebook. Somebody said they were reiterating a quote that they heard from somebody, that this person had sucked all of the serotonin out of their life. And I said, that is a toxic relationship. And it is the purest definition of vampirism to me, Yes, so I would like to combat that at all costs and use what I've learned in life in my old 60 years, to kind of give back and encourage people and let them know that, been there, done that. It's going to be okay. Don't listen to the negativity.
Well, it's certainly psychic vampirism, I think, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's so prevalent in the world, and I think it's concomitant to, the bullies in this world.
Bullies, right there.
Yeah, like to psychically vampirize in order to make themselves feel better at someone else's expense. You are unique in that as one of the Dark Shadows people who have actually gone out and have been friends. It's kind of like, the Dark Shadows fans, and I'm sure the majority of them really love what you're doing. I know they do. You're always going to have some bad apples.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate in any fandom. But the majority of them do respond and see that you care. and caring, I think, is a commodity that I don't know if the actors always want to bring that across, because maybe they're afraid that they'll be taken advantage of, or some of them will be cynical about it. But you're not that way, and it may very well have been because of your total exposure. But it's certainly a good thing, and you'd be commended for it. Why did they? Yeah, I've always thought it was sad that after your denouement as Sarah, and that was it for you. Did they ever thought of bringing you back as another character, or were there any talks like that? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, I certainly was never approached. My mother was never approached. At the time, my contract was up. That was why I was off the show. Nothing exciting happened. I didn't get fired. We got a nice letter that said thank you for, fulfilling your contract, and that character, that storyline is no more.
Right.
Whether anybody ever brought it up again, who knows? But it obviously didn't happen. I probably would have been amenable to going back on as another character. I'm sure my mother had no problem with that. We never had a bad experience with Dan Curtis Productions or anything like that. But it has been said that maybe because Sarah Collins was a ghost, that she aged out. I started to grow up and not be that cute little cherub anymore. And that may have had something to do with it. I don't know. But, it's unfortunate. I would have loved to have gone back and done more, but, it's a
That's a shame.
So
they could have done so much with you.
But whatever they did with you, of course, will always be remembered. What happened? So you decided that, after Dark Shadows ended, did you decide to get out of the business, or did you do anything else after Dark Shadows that was in the business, or you just said, okay, time to be normal again? That kind of.
Yeah. Whatever your normal is.
I know, right? I'm always reluctant to use the term normal, but.
Me too.
We don't use that word in my house. We're not normal.
I say it
not
in
normal
quotes.
in any capacity.
I say it in quotes,
That's right.
If you're
normal is boring.
If you're 5'7", that means if you're 5'6", you're abnormal. At 5'7".
Did you
get
out of the business?
After Dark Shadows, I did go on a few more auditions, and I did do a couple of things after that, commercial, small things. But to be perfectly honest with you, as I referred to earlier, by the time I was 12 and 13 years old, I was kind of obnoxious, and I didn't want to be cooperative. And when you're in the business, you do what you're told. And if you are told to eat peanut butter and smile, and you don't like peanut butter, you eat peanut butter and smile if you want the job. I was no longer willing to do things like that. And so it's a waste of time for my mother. My mother felt it's a waste of time for her to take me to New York, go through all that was involved, and for me not to be cooperative. So she kind of put it to me and said, "Do you want to do this anymore?" And I said, "No." And as Tom said, I said, I want to be normal. I want to just go back and hang out on the corner with my friends and go to high school and not be a weirdo that was on TV. So she said, fine. Again, not being the pushy mom, that fine. She didn't care one way or the other.
Did you keep in touch with the other actors through the years?
I did not for many years. It wasn't until, I believe it was 1986, I was working in Center City as a secretary, living in Philadelphia, very normal life. And I was contacted via letter by someone asking me to go to a Dark Shadows luncheon in New York City. And that kind of came out of the blue. And I thought, that's weird. This is not real. This is, some kind of con, being the cynical person that I was. And sure enough, it was real. And after a few contacts back and forth with this particular Dark Shadows representative, a fan, I agreed to go to the luncheon. And the story goes we were meeting at an Italian restaurant in New York City, and I got there and I walked in, and they had a special room in the back for this group that was coming in of these Dark Shadows people. And when I got there, someone said the table at the top of the room was where the actors were going to be, the guests. And I didn't ask any more questions. I went up to sit there, having been one of the cast members. And I was promptly told by someone up there, no, you can't sit here. You have to go sit at the regular tables, because no one recognized me.
They're going to put you at the kids' table?
That's horrible.
I know, right? I was 20 something. I had red hair. I was a grown woman. I was adult. Then, which I thought was really funny. That person who said that, I told her who I was, and she almost had a meltdown. She was so embarrassed. And I was like, it's fine, you know, you didn't know. I mean, I was 10 years old the last time you saw me. I get it, you know. And then later at that same luncheon is when that infamous picture of Jonathan holding me up in his arms like a baby happened. Again, it was before the time of cell phones and everybody taking pictures of everything. So I feel very fortunate that somebody had the wherewithal to take this picture when it happened. Jonathan came in. He was kind of almost like one of the last people to arrive. And everyone was just, the anticipation, you could taste it in the room. And he came in and, you know, everyone's making a big fuss over Jonathan. And somebody said to him, oh, your little sister Sarah is here. At which time he turned around, saw me, scooped me up in his arms, and he said, little Sarah, you've returned to me. And it was so theatrical, and it was just so wonderful and unplanned. And again, someone got an actual picture of it, and I am so blessed that they did, because that's a great memory for me.
Oh, I bet. He must have been quite the, you know, I mean, I can't imagine working with him. He just did it so well. You know, I know everybody likes Barnabas. Everybody talks about Barnabas, but he had such a great part, you know. Mm-hmm. Who gets to play a vampire, you know, with a conscience, you know?
The reluctant vampire.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, he brought something to that character that I don't even think the writers had anticipated. You know, he took it and made it his own, and we all fell in love with him. Yeah,
did you think that kind of stigmatized him as an actor? He'll be forever known as Barnabas.
Yes, unfortunately, because he was so much more than that.
Yeah.
But you know, nature of the business. And sometimes that happens. And my mother used to refer to it, not for him specifically, but my mother used to use the term pigeonholed. That some people were just pigeonholed into certain things, and we just expect that from them. And,
right. Well, it's typecast. You know, it's typecast. And that, I think, is the issue. Very few people that have been typecast have been able to take themselves out of it. Vincent Price was one who managed to do it. Christopher Lee, the Dracula, but much later in his life. But it's certainly not an easy thing. Right. And, you know, but then Jonathan, of course, you know, was the true Shakespearean actor. And, you know, but the bottom line was, I think he realized eventually this is where his bread was buttered. And
he did. You're right.
Yep. And
there was a period of time in there when Jonathan kind of took a real quiet backseat position. My mother used to say he was a man's man. He was a man's gentleman's man, something like that. I remember her referring to him to me when he moved up to Canada and kind of just removed himself from the whole business. He was going to do his own thing. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until later years that he resurfaced back in New York City with the Dark Shadows fans and embraced what was undeniable. That they were just not going to let him go, right to the bitter end.
I think he actually.
You know, it's a catch-22, I believe, because as you said, you have to recognize that this characterization is where your bread is buttered, and that's a good thing. You had a great job, a great run. You'll be known for it forever. You know,
Yep.
do you want to expound and be more than that and kind of find other things that you have to give? Of course you do. It's got to be a balance. You know, I know in my life, people say to me, "Oh, you were a child star." I said, "Well, I don't know about the star part. I had the opportunity to do something really unique as a child. But then when I got out of it, I had a few rough years, I'll give you that. But when I finally found what I felt was what I was really meant to do was be a mom.
Right.
And when I started to have children, there's a big chunk of my life in there that I'm 100% mom, 100% homemaker and caregiver, and that I love that. That I did that so well. I did that better than anything in my entire life. And then that chapter kind of comes to an end, and then you reinvent yourself once again. What do I want to give? What do I want to learn? And charge my battery too. I don't have a charger down here. This is not good.
You're on
Sorry,
you're on the computer.
I may have to run upstairs and get my charger.
Oh, well, technically you're on the computer, so as well. So if you've got the mic on, and this, of course, is going to be edited by Keith.
Yeah.
But if you want to just we can wait if you just want to run upstairs.
Do you mind? I'll come right back.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Anywhere.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Where?
Go ahead.
She's really sweet.
He's a lovely person.
Very, very lovable.
I wonder if I should pause this.
They're probably sprinting. Keith can edit it out.
All right. So, hi, Keith. Let's do a dance.
This is where I start talking behind Keith's back. I was going to hear it.
Now let's hear everything that I always wanted to know about Keith. I was afraid to ask.
So I was laughing. Your fiance didn't have nothing to worry about because he's gay. So just kidding.
No, she was. She thought that the camera that I have here had a view of the whole bedroom, and oh no, she said the bed isn't made right. The bed is you got to do it like And she's like, "Well, can they see everything?" And I said, "No, Sharon, they can only see my picture." That kind of thing. So I had to convince her twice. Okay, I see Sharon is back with us.
I'm back.
Putting her battery in.
Yeah, we can edit it out. It's not a problem.
No.
Sorry.
No, this will be edited. That's a business for you.
Technical difficulty, right?
I know. I was just sitting here laughing. I got my little dog on my lap, and she's snoring. I'm hoping the mic doesn't pick it up.
My two just came down. I had them upstairs, and now they just came down.
I had mine and the other ones in the back room with my husband and my grandson because they bark at every last thing.
Mine too. That's why I tried to keep them upstairs. Are we back? Am I in the right place?
Yes,
Yep.
you are.
Yes, you are. You're fine. You're fine. Okay. So we are now continuing.
I'm sorry. I was.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Oh.
No.
After the whole motherhood thing goes, and then you start a new chapter, and that's why I got back into. I had that acting bug, and started to do independent films, and working behind the camera as a PA, and I thoroughly enjoyed that for a few years. Actually, well, yeah, that was a whole nother time. I was thinking before I had kids, I did community theater, but this time around,
I'm sorry to interrupt. You were production assistant. Were you involved in any major stuff in California, or was this just community?
No. Only in independent film.
Okay.
More or less locally. I did do something in Massachusetts, but mostly locally. But having done that for a few years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I really had a need to do something of more significance than that. And that's not a put down for anybody in independent film at all. It's a personal decision. And I wanted to do something more impactful with my life, more significant with my life. So for the last few years, I've been very much involved in mentoring civil rights activists, conflict resolution, that kind of thing. I'm finding it very fulfilling, and my museum, of course.
That museum,
about-
I would love to see your museum. I used to be an archaeologist for the Army Corps of Engineers.
Oh, really?
I just love anything historical or anything museum-y.
Cool.
And I investigated negligent physicians for the State Medical Board in New York.
You
So-
do.
There you go.
You need to come down here to Dallas. There's plenty of that to go around.
There's plenty of that in Florida where I am now. So I got to tell you. So we all have our war stories. I always actually made a joke about if they had ever gone after Dr. Julia Hoffman for all the marvelous things outside of medicine that she was doing.
Oh my God, that's some of my favorite stuff. There is when she was messing with Barnabas and he figures it out.
Giving Barnabas the injections and all that kind of stuff.
Then she gets jealous of Josette. No, it wasn't Josette. It was who'd she get jealous of? Now it's going to bother me. I can't remember.
Maggie Evans.
Okay, yeah, probably because he was falling in love because she looked like Josette.
She was jealous. She was jealous of everyone, I think, at one point, except for, very interestingly enough, with Angelique, they actually became friends during the 1897 story arc, and I think that was very interesting, very unusual that they kind of
Don't go away.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Poor Barnabas. Everybody wanted him.
Oh yeah, strange bedfellows. I'm so glad I can talk. I didn't think I was going to be able to talk this long, Vicky, with my.
I got similar problem.
Marvelous.
I'm feeling a little peaked today.
Well, you're not the only one. I'm on Tylenol with codeine.
I'm sorry.
Keep that in. No, I was just telling Vicky, I'm getting over a dental extraction that I had earlier on in the week. And,
ow.
Yeah, not kidding, 2 teeth. So I'm in the middle
Oh, that's awful. I'm sorry to hear that.
of Tylenol with codeine. So I'm like, I'm just happy I can talk today.
You look much better.
Oh, thank you. Well, no, I know. I was not, I was not in a good mood earlier in the week. But by the way, Sharon, in terms of technical difficulties, you're doing great.
You're a very engaging person. I mean, I just love listening to your stories. Like if I keep you here for 2 more hours, I would.
No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that to her. She has a family.
Then everybody will avoid us when we want to interview them. They won't let you go.
I just want to give you a quick thing. We're trying to do Roger Davis now. We're trying to interview him. And
he's a talker.
Oh, yeah. The problem is he is not able to work the computer well.
Doesn't he have a secretary?
Yeah, he has a secretary, and I don't know the story with that, but we tried to do something with him. He called in on the phone, and the call dropped twice, but because he put it on Do Not Disturb.
Keith was telling me. What a shame.
He wound up talking into the phone for 40 minutes, and we couldn't get to him. So he was talking to the air. Oh, God.
Oh.
Poor guy. I'm going to try to do this tomorrow with him through another mechanism.
Oh, you are going to try again?
Hopefully tomorrow with Skype. We're doing that.
Did you get to talk to Marie?
That's going to happen. Well, all this is going to be edited, but Marie Wallace, hopefully. I think at this point I think we want to wait until Keith comes back.
Okay. But she's very engaging as well. Marie's adorable. She has so much experience.
We'd love to talk to her. We spoke to her also in April, and she was busy with the Parsippany Convention. And then she said she was going to get back and has not contacted us. So I'm hoping like perhaps in June, I'm going to reach out to her because Keith is on vacation right now.
Right.
And I'm going to
we'll get them all.
Yeah, right.
Cool.
But I know that he felt very bad that he couldn't make talking to you. But anyway, so Sharon, you've been involved in the business world. Were you in insurance at one point, as I remember?
I worked for several insurance companies from right out of high school until I was about 25 years old. Different insurance companies. I started out just inputting information, and obviously the more I learned, the more I got into administrative position. And then I ended up working for Unique Industries, which is a party good company, but they paid really well.
Wow, that's great. So now, and you're a grandma now too, as well.
Oh my gosh, yes, my youngest. Well, I have a stepdaughter. She's been my stepdaughter since she was 3. She's 38 now.
Oh my
no, did she turn 40 yet? Oh my goodness, I'm getting old. She has 3 children. The youngest is 13. The oldest is 22. I don't get to see them as often as I would like to because they're older now and they all living their lives, doing their thing.
I feel ya.
I have 2 children of my own. One's 28, one's 25. And the 25-year-old has a significant other that he's been with for a couple of years now who has 3 children that I like to consider my almost grandchildren. So
Family.
I can loosely say I have 6 grandchildren.
Well, there you go.
They're fun.
Someone who has, after Dark Shadows, went on to have a productive professional and personal life. And we're all very pleased that you went on to do that. But despite that, you never forgot the fans.
No, that's what I find really cool is you just, you still have respect for the fans and you still love them. And it's just like such a big deal to people, and because
it really is.
I mean, did you know that it's, did you think that it was going to have the effect that it did when they started the show? I mean,
no way.
It is just, it's so, everybody's like, we have to buy the Dark Shadows Almanac to keep you all straight. But I mean, what's the word I want to use? It's a
phenomenon.
Phenomenon. Yeah.
Complete phenomenon. Yeah. No one had any idea
and
that it would have the longevity that it would.
And we're binge watching as much as we can. I mean, it's cool to see it. I've often wondered through the years, is like, there's no way I could get all those VHS tapes when they were tapes. That would have been crazy. So I'm just so glad that they're revisiting it on Amazon Prime because, I mean, it's fantastic to go back and see all that, because you couldn't find them for years, really.
Right.
If you get the occasional.
Well, the funny thing is, okay, there's over 1,200 episodes.
Right.
I think it's like 1235, something like that.
Yeah.
But one point that I always like to bring out was that Dark Shadows, the soap opera, was the first soap opera to be syndicated. The first soap opera to be available on VHS and now DVDs and now Prime. I mean, It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And with regards to the fans, no joke, I don't say this lightly. Majority of the fans that I come in contact with are genuinely my friends. They become my friends. And again, I love Facebook because it makes it so easy to interact with people, to be a part of their life, to have them be a part of mine. Some people have said to me over the years, online relationships aren't real relationships. I beg to differ. They are.
I've got friends like some in Calgary. I've never met them ever. And they are some of the best people I know. And we write together every day. And, we keep up with each other's lives. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
The contributions that you have made to Dark Shadows will probably always be remembered. And I'm sure that, the fans who have become your friends, and hopefully we're included among them, are very delighted that we have actually gotten a chance to get to know you in a way that we could never really have done otherwise, especially when you were a kid. You know, there was no way that we could have done it back then. So I can only hope there will be more Dark Shadows get-togethers in the future.
I would like to make one. It'd be great to they would come to Dallas only. But I heard there's another one in New York City, a convention next year, I think.
What is this? I didn't hear about this one.
Yeah, I think me and Keith were talking. I'm pretty sure he said next year. Yeah, this year or next year.
I'd like to hear about that. Well, we just had the one in April, where that's actually, where I ran into Sharon, where they did the Master of Dark Shadows DVD, which I understand is doing extremely well, and that's certainly a harbinger. And there's talk. I don't know if you caught it, Sharon, but there's talk among the fandom. People want to start to get a petition going to get it back on, maybe on the CW or Netflix.
Yeah, absolutely. I support that.
CW would probably do it. I mean, some people don't have Amazon Prime,
It's most logical because CW, of course, Warner Brothers is the parent company.
Right.
Warner Brothers owns the rights along with Dan Curtis Productions. So that would be the first one to go through. But the others, and of course it has to be done right. And, because the incarnations, that's another story altogether. Did you happen to catch the revival by any chance, Sharon, the 91 revival? I
did, and I thought it was really, really good. It was really well done. It was a shame that it got ended there. I believe that it could have gone on and been very successful, but unfortunately at the time they were being preempted a lot, and it ended.
Are you talking about the redo?
The Ben Cross.
Ben Cross.
I thought that it was beautifully filmed and stuff. I thought they had something going there. I loved it. I was so upset when they canceled it. It's like, no, there's so much more I need to see. But I just really wish they would have stuck with it. But because of the Gulf War, they kept preempting it all the time, and it just wasn't on.
Yep.
But as a side note, I'm not going to lie to you. Even though they did a wonderful job, Ben Cross is not my Barnabas.
It was not your Barnabas. No one will be.
A lot of people feel that way. A lot of people, Jonathan will be forever enshrined as the original Barnabas.
Really?
And nobody's going to take that away from him.
No.
And I do hope. I know there were efforts to get him on the Canadian Hall Walk Hall of Fame.
Jonathan,
yeah. And I know that you were a proponent of that, Sharon. I saw that in an article where they interviewed you a couple of years back, and I hope they still do that, because he really did contribute in his own way. Of course, that's, but in any event, Vicki, did you have anything further that you wanted to ask Sharon?
No, I just think that it's, like you said, phenomenon that I don't think people expected, to be, because even kids now were watching it, like my teenagers, I know everybody running to Amazon Prime to watch it. And I just always wondered, did people think that it was really bizarre with all these vampires and werewolves and all this stuff and witches, on a daytime soap opera? I mean, it just really got really good.
It was certainly unheard of at the time. It was unique, to say the least. But I have many, many stories over the years that fans have told me, the impact that the show has had on them and their experiences. Very varied experiences of why the show was so important to them.
Because it was like a moment turning on your friends after school,
From the sublime to the ridiculous. But I have to tell you one quick story that just happened yesterday. It just never ceases to amaze me. I constantly hear this story. My own 28-year-old daughter texted me and told me that she went to a graduation party for her boyfriend's sister. So there was family there. And among the many conversations, it happened to come up that her mom was on Dark Shadows. Why did that come up? I don't know, but it does. And my daughter told her boyfriend's aunt that her mother was on Dark Shadows. The reaction, the aunt started to cry. And I said to my daughter, why was she crying? And she said she told my daughter that the show had such a huge impact on her and her brother that when she thinks about it, it made her emotional. You know, on the one hand, to me, that's bizarre that this soap opera would have that kind of an impact on someone. But on the other hand, I completely respect the fact that this show meant so much to somebody. And I hear it a lot, so it's not even just one person. But I said to my daughter, I said, get her address. I'll send her a whole bunch of DS stuff and tell her to Facebook friend request me.
That's nice. That's nice.
Anybody who cries at the reaction of Dark Shadows, they need to be involved. You know?
Right.
They need to know that there are others out there like them.
Well,
She had no idea.
That's so sweet.
Well, I'll tell you myself that I think the thing with the Barnabas character was, somebody who was trying to find himself, who could never love who never was able to really love the person he wanted to love, and in terms of all that you love will die and all that, all adolescent,
and hurt the ones that he did, yeah.
Exactly, all adolescent stuff that the teenagers at the time were going through, in terms of the transition between childhood and adolescence.
Absolutely.
And so they identified with that. So to see it over again, I think takes you back to that time. If you were a fan during that period of time, it takes you back to your own search for self-discovery during that time. And I will tell you that when the scene where you said your goodbye to Barnabas when your character died, I was crying. So there you go.
What number episode was that?
No. Go ahead.
460?
451, something like that. I probably have it somewhere.
Well, it's great to meet somebody from the dark. It's great to meet a star that knows just about as much as the fans do, if not more.
I've learned a lot from the fans.
I was just saying, gee, I don't remember the number. That's great.
I know my first episode was 255, and I think my last one was 415. 415.
There you go. That was your one, the one where you said goodbye.
I've got to see that again. It's like, I'm so glad they're out now, because when I was a little girl, my mother truly, when I was like 5, 3, 4, and 5, and it just scared the bejesus out of me. And I didn't, my brothers, though, they would just pop the TV on and watch it anyway. But now I can revisit all of them because I can, watch all of these episodes from start to finish. And it's so much fun watching them. I mean, I'll sit there. It's like one more episode, maybe just one more episode, and it's so much fun to.
Well, you're very lucky not to have to wait from Friday to Monday.
That's true.
Exactly.
Well, but think of this, and I used to have to go away during the summers with my parents up to the Catskills, where you could never get TV reception.
Oh God, I know.
I was so mad. I was saying, no, keep me. You go up. I'll stay in Brooklyn.
Yeah, right.
That kind of thing. Plus, going to high school and not being able to come home till 20 after 4 because of that particular schedule that the high school had. And I actually called a cousin to tell me what was going on, and he said, "Sure, I will, but I want money for it." So
enterprising young man.
Yes. Well, his mother took care of that business. Let me tell you, that business was destroyed. But what lengths fans will go to. In any event, Sharon, we do want to. Is there anything currently? You mentioned before we sign off. You mentioned that you're currently involved in the museum effort. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? You're on the board of directors. What are you doing now?
Well, we currently have an exhibit at the Pearl S. Buck International House in Percy, Pennsylvania, which we're very proud of because the African American Museum of Bucks County does not currently have a brick and mortar building. We go out into libraries and schools and community events, and our sole purpose is to bring African American history that is not being taught to light. We believe that African American history is American history. Unfortunately, a lot of it has been, for lack of a better term, whitewashed and left out. The more I find out, the more important it is to get that information out there. Our country has literally been built on the backs of people that have not been recognized. I'm an advocate for diversity. I'm an advocate for equal rights, cross race lines and others. I'm involved in the Peace Center here in Langhorne. And I try to communicate through my Facebook page. I'm not beating anybody over the head about anything. It's just something that I'm very interested in, and I feel like it's very, very important, especially in this.
We need some peace. We do.
Yeah, in this time right now, it's not pretty. There's a lot more leniency towards hate and bullying and stigmatisms and. You know, any small way that I can utilize my white privilege to change that, my middle class American woman privilege to change that, I would like to utilize the time I have to do that. So the Peace Center, for people that are in their own communities, I would encourage you to find out what organizations are working with youth, with at-risk women.
There's a lot of
They
that.
need your resource. They need your resource.
It's an admirable effort. And of course, we encourage our podcast listeners around the world who would like to get in touch with Sharon on Facebook to look for her website.
And y'all be nice. She's fantastic.
That's right. That's right. Otherwise, we're going to come after you.
Really appreciate
Trust me, I know everyone does not agree with me, and everyone is not in the same on the same side of the fence as me, and that's okay. Everyone has a right to their own opinions, but I have to do what makes me feel good and how I sleep well at the end of the day. So
I'm really glad you came on. I mean, taking the time to talk to us. I know that people will love to hear this episode and hear all about what's going on with you and your stories, because I'm sure we could sit here for 2 days. You got more stories. I know you do.
Oh, she's got a family, Vicki.
I know she got a family. I got a grandson. I got him hidden in the back room with my husband.
And
Two more dogs.
And I've got a fiance.
My puppies are digging at the door at the top of the steps.
Oh, that's great. So thank you all. Thank you once again, Sharon, for participating with us. We certainly, we'd like to have you back again one day as a guest. If things come across.
We'll catch up and see what good things you're up to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I enjoyed talking to both of you.
Thank you so much. I really so appreciate it. It's just been a pleasure.
But for now, thanks once again to everybody. And see you again.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
This has been a Literary License Podcast production. If you cry for help, there's no help for you.